and we'll get underway. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish. Today is Tuesday, May 21st. Holland Squallen, Quistluctamuk, Tla Squamish, Ochmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, and we're exceedingly lucky and privileged to do so. Could I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just checking. Oh, and just a note to those participating. Councillor Stoner is participating remotely today, but she's online and with us right now. Our first order of business is a delegation from Save Your Skin Foundation. And do we have someone? I believe we have someone speaking to this. I don't know if it's in person or remote. Nope. Kathleen. Oh, no, we're looking for Kathleen. I'm not seeing a hand or anyone approaching the podium. So we have a request that May 2024 be proclaimed Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month in the District of Squamish. And we did have a name. Maybe it's okay with council. We'll go. We have another delegation, the Pacific Salmon Foundation. So maybe we'll go to those folks first, and we can circle back and see if Kathleen is going to be able to join us. So yeah, you can approach the podium. I think the podium would probably work best. I think. Yeah. So I will turn it over to you. If you could introduce yourself and your topic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to attend this evening's council meeting. My name is Tracy Green. I am the Marketing and Communications Manager for the Pacific Salmon Foundation, and I'm joined with my colleague Bruno Carturan, who's a data analyst for our Salmon Watersheds program, and Bruno also lives in Squamish. So he's the lucky one of the two with us. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded and traditional territory of the Squamish Nation, and that salmon have been an integral part of Squamish culture since time immemorial. So this is significant to our discussion this evening, as we're here to request that the District of Squamish proclaim June 1st Wild Salmon Day. So the Pacific Salmon Foundation is an organization solely focused on the restoration and resiliency of wild salmon. In 2019, the British Columbia government asked us to bring awareness to this iconic species by hosting the first Wild Salmon Day. So by proclaiming June 1st Wild Salmon Day in Squamish, you join the province of British Columbia, along with dozens of other municipalities from Prince George to Nanaimo to Vancouver and beyond, in recognizing the significant cultural and environmental place that Pacific salmon have in our communities. We're pleased that the Yukon Territory has also joined us this year in celebrating Wild Salmon Day on June 1st. So this upwelling of support is hopeful to us at the Pacific Salmon Foundation, because salmon need us now more than ever. In fact, we know that more than half of the salmon populations in BC are in a state of decline. Through our science work, we know that salmon are strong and resilient, but up against many challenges, including habitat degradation and loss, pollution, pathogens, and massively shifting conditions brought on by climate change that we've seen over the past several years. So, but salmon also have a broad community of people working on their behalf, and this includes many stream keepers and environmental organizations in Squamish. That's why we're here. Over the past 20 years, PSF has granted nearly $400,000 to community groups in the District of Squamish. Most recently in 2024, just in the past month, we've granted funds to the Squamish Stream Keepers and Squamish River Watershed Society for stewardship and community planning activities. So we've also provided grants in the community for yellow fish signage around the community, to school groups for classroom education, for habitat assessment of Ilaho River Chinook, as well as numerous habitat restoration projects on the Squamish River, Squamish Estuary, the Spit, and Ilaho River, just to name a few. So we're proud to be working together with the community of Squamish and the organizations here to protect and rebuild salmon in Squamish. And we have a vision, shared vision of healthy, sustainable, and naturally diverse populations of Pacific salmon for the benefit of the ecosystems and people for generations to come. So this evening, we hope that Mayor and Council will join our efforts to save and restore salmon populations and recognize the cultural and environmental significance of wild salmon in BC by declaring June 1st as Wild Salmon Day. So thank you for your consideration, and we're available to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Council, do we have any questions for our guests at this time? Seeing none, we also have a recommendation. Councillor Hamilton.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor French. Would you like to speak to it?
So I never had the pleasure, the honor of watching salmon spawn until I moved here to Squamish, and it must be such a remarkable thing. So for people who have grown up here, and that's just part of their life, it must just become a seasonal thing. But it really is a remarkable thing to see salmon spawn, particularly in your own town when you're walking the dog or going for a walk with friends. So absolutely, thank you for the work you do here in Squamish, but also clearly salmon are an integral part of our ocean ecosystem. Thank you for your work, the work you do on behalf of salmon and our ecosystems.
Thank you for that. Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for coming tonight, and thanks for sharing your words. I'm pleased to support the motion, and I'm happy that I don't want to prejudge, but I'm pretty sure we're gonna make this official. And I wish that we could do more, and I don't know what we could do, but if there is something that we could do that you could share with us by email or in the future, please let us know. Because not that making this declaration is nothing, because it is something, but if there's something more we could do, I wish that we would do it.
Thank you for that. Other comments? Councillor Penningill?
Yeah, happy to support this. It's critically important. We know that salmon stocks have been struggling, and I think we will probably have maybe at least one more opportunity tonight to do something more for this. And so we'll see where we go. But I think happy to support this, and it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
The District of Squamish has a sister city in Japan. It's in a region where they are engaged in chum salmon restoration initiatives. And I've suggested to my colleagues that we should be probing them and seeing if we can do some information exchange on their initiatives. And if we do, we'll keep in touch with you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Anderson. Any other comments? Just happy to support. Thank you so much for the work. And I grew up where the stream system was in my backyard, and the such a reliable should be a reliable signal of the changing seasons, and keeping track of where we all are is what's happening with our salmon. So I really appreciate this work, and it is. And although I have that familiarity with it, I share Councillor Hamilton's sort of awe of the experience. So thank you so much. I'm happy to support. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to go back to the Save Your Skin Foundation. And I believe we have Kathleen Barnard is joining us.
Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
The
Sorry
floor is
about
yours.
the technical difficulty. You'd think, over the last 3 years, we'd be masters at this. But thank you again so much for having me and for proclaiming May to be Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month. My name's Kathy Barnard, and I'm the founder of the Save Your Skin Foundation. Skin cancer is now the most common of all cancers. 1 in 6 Canadians born in the 1990s will get skin cancer in their lifetimes. There are more new cases of skin cancer each year than the number of breast, prostate, lung, and colon cancer combined. I know that firsthand, as in 2003, I was diagnosed with the deadliest form of skin cancer, melanoma, and by 2005, it spread to my liver, my lung, my bone, my adrenal gland, and my kidney. I was given 6 months to live. I would never have thought that my days as a child at local lakes and oceans or my days on a softball diamond would turn so deadly for me. Melanoma is now the 7th most common cancer in Canada and the 4th most common among people ages 15 to 29. It is one of the few cancers with incident rates on the rise among Canadians. Exposure to UV radiation through exposure to sunlight, tanning beds, and sun lamps appears to be a major risk factor for melanoma. I always like to remind everybody that your skin is the largest organ of your body, and it's the one organ that you can see, your loved one can see, or even the person sitting next to you tonight can see. Early detection and prevention is key to this type of cancer. No cancer, including melanoma, can ever be prevented with 100% certainty, but the good news with melanoma is that the risk factors are well known, so steps can be taken to dramatically reduce your risk of developing this deadly disease. So I'd like to remind you how to protect yourself. Always have your sunscreen with you so you can apply it whenever an unplanned outdoor activity arises. Use a sunscreen with an SPF of at least 30 whenever you are outdoors, even on those gray days. Seek out shade when the UV index is high. If you can, wear protective clothing with long sleeves, hats, and especially sunglasses. Check for changes in your moles, new moles, and see your doctor immediately if anything is suspicious. If you can, limit your sun exposure between 10 and 4 and try to stay away from the tanning beds. You should hope to get a cancer-related checkup by a doctor, including skin examinations, every 3 years between ages to 20 and 40, and annually for those 40 and older. If you see something suspicious, see your doctor immediately. So what can you do to protect your communities? We're hoping that you will incorporate a sun safety through environmental design program, which involves considerable safety measures when you're constructing any new structure, park, or sporting venue. This year, you also have an opportunity to take part in the free Save Your Skin Foundation Sunscreen Dispenser pilot program, and we're hoping that you'll contact us a little bit later to discuss that. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about the foundation. We are a patient-led, not-for-profit organization that was founded by myself and my family in 2006 here in North Vancouver, British Columbia. We are absolutely dedicated to fighting non-melanoma skin cancers, melanoma, ocular melanoma through education, advocacy, and awareness initiatives across all of Canada. We provide a community of support for oncology patients and caregivers throughout the entire continuum of care, from prevention and diagnosis and on to survivorship. We are the leading melanoma organization in Canada, and we collaborate with patient advocacy groups all throughout Canada and even in the US. We're very unique in the patient advocacy space. All the funds that we received and donations given to Save Your Skin go directly to a patient needing financial or emotional support. So if you have a patient in Squamish that needs to get to North Vancouver or to the BC Cancer Agency in Vancouver, needs to get up to Whistler for any type of scan, we will pay for parking, gas, daycare, accommodation, you name it, we will help you out. I always say there is no ask too small, too ask too big. We started the foundation because we as a family, I had to actually travel to Edmonton, Alberta to be saved. And it was a huge financial and emotional cost to my family. And it took me out of my community in which I did coaching and volunteering. And we just want to make sure for everybody diagnosed with one of these cancers that they find Save Your Skin. So please go visit our website, saveyourskin.ca. And again, thank you so much for proclaiming May as Melanoma Awareness Month and for helping us raise awareness about this type of cancer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the amazing work that you do. Council, do we have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Kathy, for joining us and taking the time. Did a little digging, and I saw that every month there are fireside chats that are held. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about those calls and how anybody who's interested in participating would go about actually being a part of those.
Absolutely. They can just check us out at savourskin.ca. The reason we host those and hold those is because, to be really honest, when I was first diagnosed, there were no treatment available options for me, and there was no survivors for me to talk to. Most people in 2003, 4, 5, and beyond were dying to this disease. And I know how much I would have given anything to be able to dial a 1-800 number or go onto Google and find somebody that I could talk to. So that's why we don't create anything at Save Your Skin without circling back with patients that have been diagnosed and with all the treaters in Canada. So we're really instrumental in navigating the whole process. We work with Health Canada, we work with all the provinces, we work with all the cancer centers, and I would have to say probably all of the treaters in this type of disease to really make sure that the patients never fall between a crack. We also know that the new innovative medicines came to melanoma in 2011. They were the new immuno-oncologies and the new targeted therapies, and every day is changing in the melanoma space, and really, to be honest, in all of cancer. So now I have to be honest, beyond melanoma and non-melanoma, we are now really instrumental in working with all other cancer indications to make sure that we help them navigate into this whole new cancer world that we are now seeing before us.
Great. Thanks for that additional information.
Thank you. I have Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks so much for the presentation, the in-depth information and the education awareness and all the work that you're doing. Just a quick question on the sunscreen dispenser pilot program. I'm curious if that has to be through the municipality or if that can be through organizations who are hosting events in community through the summer, if you have a preference.
Both. What we do is we like to work with the communities. You know your community best. You know where those sunscreen dispensers are best utilized and used. Every community we work with now has them in different places. Some have them at an outdoor swimming pool. Some are using them at their outdoor work yards. We have some communities that are taking them from event to event to event. So we really want to be collaborators and partners with you on a project like this. And you really are the best ones to tell us where they should go. This year, we really want to do a focus too on our marginalized communities. We know that, a lot of those populations cannot afford sunscreen. It's not cheap. So, I mean, even if there's, initiatives or places that you think they could be really utilized and there's a huge need, we would actually have them brought there. So it's really where you see fit in your community.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Council? We also have a recommendation that May 2024 be proclaimed Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month in the District of Squamish, which I will move if there's a seconder. Councillor Hamilton seconds. Yeah, thank you so much for the work that you do, and we know that our healthcare system is challenged in many ways, and it's great to hear that of your positive outcome and likely the positive outcome for many others that you've facilitated through your work. So I think that access to care is incredibly important, and also the prevention piece, which is front and center in what you do. So I'm happy to support, and thank you for taking the time, in general, to do this work and to be with us here this evening as well. So I'll be happy to support. Are there any other comments around the table? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, just wish this work wasn't this important, but it is, unfortunately. And so I'm glad you're here to do it, and appreciate the support you're giving communities. And I hope we can find some ways to take you up on the sunscreen program. I know it's on my to-do list actually to make an appointment with my doctor. It's sort of in my calendar at the moment. So thank you for that extra reminder, and yeah, really appreciate the presentation. Happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments, Council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So our next piece of business is consideration of unscheduled public attendance. If anyone has a matter that they would like to address that requires council attention prior to the next regular business meeting in 2 weeks, now would be your time. Yes, you can approach the podium, and before you get underway, I'll just cover the procedures for this portion. The point to how this works is you have 5 minutes to address council, but the point is to understand why the matter that you're speaking to needs to be heard tonight critically rather than in 2 weeks the next scheduled attendance. And then we'll vote whether we want to hear that. And then later on the agenda, if accepted by the majority of council, that's where the actual content is. It's a bit of a mind exercise, but that's what happens in these spaces sometimes. So the floor is yours. If you could start with your full name and then you have 5 minutes to address council.
Okay. My name is Tracy Saxby. I'm the co-founder and executive director of My Sea to Sky. I'd like to speak to 2 items that appear on the District of Squamish agenda this evening, items 7B3 and 7B7, both of which are correspondence from Woodfibre LNG regarding the temporary use permit for its proposed floating work camp. The reason that I would like to speak to this issue this evening is that we have been led to believe that one of the councillors that I spoke with earlier today is considering bringing forward a motion to reconsider the council decision denying Woodfibre LNG's floating work camp.
Okay, thank you. So council, this is where we would put forward a motion to hear from Ms. Saxby on these items. Are you moving that? Is that what you're doing? Councillor Hamilton moves. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor French. Would you like any comments on this? No? Okay. I think from the chair seat, I'm supportive of this. From the chair seat, I'll look to my colleagues to figure out the best time for that to slot in, because we will likely need to suspend the order of the agenda to make this make sense in a rational way. But having said that, I'm supportive of this direction. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. So stick around. We'll find the appropriate spot to address that. Thank you. So next, we have no. So any other consideration of unscheduled public attendance? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. We have no public hearings this evening. Nothing under item 6. So now we're onto the consent agenda, and I'll pull those 2 letters that Ms. Saxby spoke to. So this is 7B3 and 7B7. And then I will, with those 2 pulled, I'll move the consent agenda. Seconded. Oh, sorry. Just a sec.
Mayor Herford, I did have an additional item I wish to pull if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I wish to pull number 7B2, letter regarding restoring passenger rail service for the Sea to Sky corridor.
Okay, thank you. So with those 3 items removed from the consent agenda, are you seconding that, Councillor French? Thank you.
Chair,
Sorry, yep, go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
I'd also like to pull item 7C1, please.
C1.
It's a memo from staff, and appreciate staff might not be able to speak to it, but I'd like to action. Thank you.
Yep, fair. No, that's fine. Okay, so we've got 4 items removed from the consent agenda. Everyone's clear on what they are. I'm moving the consent agenda with those 4 items removed, and Councillor French is still seconding. Is that correct? Yes, thank you, Councillor French. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to bylaws. First consideration of first 3 readings. We have some financial bylaws here. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Rianne Sousa, and I'm the Director of Financial Operations at the district. To assist with addressing me, my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm here today to present the 2024 Loan Authorization, Temporary Borrowing, and Repealing Bylaws. For the community's background, a loan authorization bylaw is for long-term borrowing, and a temporary borrowing bylaw is for short-term borrowing. The goal of the presentation today is for Council to give first 3 readings to these bylaws. The community charter is the legislation that a municipality is required to follow when entering into borrowing. Under the community charter, a municipality must adopt a loan authorization bylaw prior to entering into long-term borrowing, which is subject to an electoral process. There are 2 options for electoral processes, which are assent voting or an alternative approval process. Once a loan authorization bylaw is adopted, a temporary borrowing bylaw may be adopted up to the amount that is authorized under the loan authorization bylaw. To note, the maximum debt servicing a municipality can incur by legislation is 25% of revenues. The district's long-term financial plan guidelines and policies have limited this to 20%. For the community's background, capital project expenditures and funding are approved by Council during the 5-year financial planning process. The next step is the administrative process, which is in front of Council today, which is adopting the loan authorization and temporary borrowing bylaws. The long-term borrowing that has not already been adopted through loan authorization bylaws are Whitaker Slough Pump Station for $2.3 million, Winaic Park Sea Dike for $5.1 million, Loggers East Drainage Diversion for $1.3 million, the cemetery expansion for $1.7 million, wastewater treatment plant headworks for $12 million, and bridge resurfacing for $5 million. This slide represents if the full amount of the debt was issued for 20 years at an interest rate of 4.9%, which was the rate at the time of preparing the Council report. The total annual debt servicing cost, which is principal and interest, would be $2.3 million. The impact on the debt servicing limit is it will bring the district's debt servicing to 15.7%. If the full amount of the loan authorization bylaws that are funded by general taxation were borrowed at the stated rates and a 20-year term, the annual cost to property owners per $100,000 of assessed value are equal to the following. Whitaker Slough Pump Station is 88 cents for residential owners and $2.26 for business owners. Winaic Park Sea Dike is $1.95 for residential owners and $4.88 for business owners. Loggers East Drainage Diversion is 52 cents for residential owners and $1.30 for business owners. Cemetery expansion is 64 cents for residential owners and $1.60 for business owners. Bridge resurfacing is $1.95 for residential owners and $4.86 for business owners. The wastewater treatment plant headworks building will be funded by wastewater utility fees, which has an impact of $86.20 per residential property owner. To note, commercial wastewater utility fees differ by type of business classification as outlined in the fees and charges bylaw. I'll next speak to the temporary borrowing bylaws. It is best practice to adopt temporary borrowing bylaws in addition to loan authorization bylaws. This is due to borrowing under a loan authorization can only be borrowed once the expenditures are incurred. Therefore, temporary borrowing provides short-term working capital to fund the projects until the long-term borrowing can be issued. This slide represents if the district borrowed the full amount authorized through temporary borrowing bylaw at the interest rate at the time of the report to Council was prepared, which was 5.4%. The total average monthly interest payment would be $127,000. Lastly, I'll speak to the loan authorizations to be repealed. In prior years, loan authorization bylaws were adopted for the following projects: the landfill and gas capture and flare project, the water metering project, the Pioneer Way expansion project, and the fire fleet replacement pump truck project. An alternative funding source has been identified for each of these projects, and therefore the loan authorization bylaws are being repealed so that they no longer affect the district's debt servicing capacity. Following first 3 readings of the loan authorization bylaws, the next steps are the loan authorization bylaws are forwarded to the Inspector of Municipalities for approval. Once approved by the inspector, an electoral process is undertaken. Staff are recommending the alternative approval process. After the alternative approval process, council adopts the bylaws. There is then a 30-day quashing period. Following first 3 readings of the repeal bylaws, the next step is to bring them forward for adoption. In regards to public engagement, the engagement started with the development of the 5-year financial plan, which included consultation with the community. The next public engagement steps are the projects and details about the alternative approval process will be advertised in the Chief over 2 consecutive weeks and will be shared through the district's social media channels and e-newsletter for the same 2 weeks. The advertisements will be linked to the district's website, which will have a page dedicated for each project to provide a fulsome overview of the project. A key message supporting the project information will be to explain how long-term borrowing is a valuable tool for a municipality to spread the costs of capital projects over many years so that the future taxpayers also help pay for the projects they will benefit from. It is staff's recommendation that the loan authorization, temporary borrowing, and repeal bylaws are given first 3 readings. This concludes the presentation, and I'll now turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much. Council, questions on this? Go ahead. No questions? You're getting ready to move? Is that what you're doing? Okay, we've got any questions before Councillor Pettingill moves us along here? Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. A question I think I know the answer to, but just wanted some clarification on. The total cost of each project includes the cost of debt servicing, correct? So when we issue a loan authorization bylaw for $15 million for a project, that includes the cost of borrowing that $15 million over that term?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, Heather Boxer, General Manager of Financial Information Technology and Procurement Services. Thanks for the question. So the project cost is not actually, the debt servicing payments, which include interest, are not actually part of the project cost. That comes through the interest expense, which is an operations cost.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Stoner?
No, but that's different than how I imagined it worked. So that's good.
That's fine.
At this point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, any other questions? I'll go back to Councillor Pettingill. You move staff recommendation. Thank you. Do we need, sorry, just quickly, are these grouped in a way that we can move many together? Do we need to do each of them individually? Okay, so thank you for moving the first one, and I will second that. So the first one being the District of Squamish Water Meter Capital Works Loan Authorization Bylaw, repeal bylaw. So any comments on this one? Oh, go ahead. Yep.
Just to note that we've sort of gone through this as part of our budgeting and financial planning and so on. So we're just sort of doing the last step here.
Yes, thank you. These are very administrative steps. Absolutely. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So next is the District of Squamish Landfill Gas Capture and Flare Capital Works Loan Authorization Bylaw, and this is another repeal bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor Anderson. I almost said Erickson for some reason. Eric, I don't know. Sorry. And are there any I'm going to move through these quickly, so please wave if you want to speak to a specific one. But with this, I'll call the question here. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So next we have the District of Squamish Fire Fleet Replacement Pumper Truck Loan Authorization Bylaw. And again, this is another repeal bylaw. So number 3 on our list. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Pettingill. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, number 4, District of Squamish Pioneer Way Extension, Capital Works Loan Authorization Bylaw, another repeal bylaw. I'll move that. Councillor French seconds. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, District of Squamish Whitaker Slough Pump Station Loan Authorization Bylaw, not a repeal, a loan authorization bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor Pettingill. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, District of Squamish temporary borrowing for Whitaker Slough Pump Station bylaw, which is item 6 on our list. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. On to item 7, which is Honiak Sea Dyke loan authorization bylaw. Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, item 8, District of Squamish temporary borrowing for Honiak Sea Dyke bylaw. Moved by Councillor Pettingill, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. In case you haven't picked up on this, for those watching, there's a few of these and we're making good progress here. Item 9, District of Squamish Loggers East Drainage Diversion Pipe Loan Authorization Bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 10, District of Squamish temporary borrowing for Loggers East Drainage Diversion Pipe Bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, item 11, District of Squamish expansion of the cemetery loan authorization bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have the matching temporary borrowing for the expansion of the cemetery bylaw. Moved by Councillor Pettingill, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. On to item 13, District of Squamish wastewater treatment plant headworks building loan authorization bylaw. Moved by Councillor French and seconded by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 14, which is the temporary borrowing to accompany that for the wastewater treatment plant headworks building. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have the District of Squamish bridge resurfacing loan authorization bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And the temporary borrowing that accompanies this, moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So then we go to, I believe this is where we stop for another presentation. Is this revenue anticipation bylaw? Is that correct? Okay. Back to staff for this portion.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Rianne Sousa, and I'm the Director of Financial Operations at the district. Just reintroducing myself in case someone from the community is just joining us. To assist with addressing me, my pronouns are she and her. The goal of the presentation today is that Council give first 3 readings to the District of Squamish Revenue Anticipation Bylaw. For Council and the community's background, the Community Charter of BC states that a council may, by bylaw, provide for the borrowing of money that may be necessary to meet current lawful expenditures. In order to do this, a bylaw referred to in the legislation as revenue anticipation must be adopted annually. The legislation recognizes that the main revenue source for municipalities is property taxation, which is due for collection the first working day in July. In addition, the district has significant expenditures in large capital projects that can spike its average expenditures from time to time. Although the district has sufficient cash flow, it maintains a line of credit with its financial institution, Scotiabank, to ensure it mitigates the risk of short-term working capital deficits. The line of credit that is maintained is $2 million, and there are no fees that are charged on this line of credit. The motion before council is that the District of Squamish give first 3 readings to District of Squamish Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 3084/2024. This concludes the presentation. I'll now turn this back over to the chair.
Thank you. Council, any questions on this? And we do have a recommendation before us, if that's where we are. Councillor Pettingill, are you moving the recommendation? Thank you. Second by Councillor Hamilton. Again, this is a very procedural piece that we've been through many times around this table already. So are there any comments on this at all? Nope. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So next up, we have some planning items around Bill 44, which is the small scale multi-unit housing zoning bylaw update. And I will turn it over to staff when they're ready to introduce themselves and the topic.
Thank you, Mayor Hereford. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, planner with Community Planning. I'm here tonight to present the zoning bylaw update related to the changes required by the province through Bill 44 for consideration of first 3 readings. Staff presented the draft Bill 44 zoning bylaw update amendments at the April 9th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting, where staff were directed to bring the amendments forward for consideration of first 3 readings. The committee requested the following information to be provided when the bylaws were brought back forward for readings. A track changes copy of the Bill 44 zoning bylaw amendments, which can be found attached to the staff report. Data on the number of duplexes and triplexes constructed since the zoning bylaw amendments that permitted triplexes on corner lots in RS2 were adopted in 2018. So currently the district includes over 1,100 properties zoned RS2, which allows 2-unit dwellings, also known as duplexes, and allows triplexes on corner lots. Over the past 10 years, the average number of duplex developments on RS2 properties has been at a rate of just under 2 per year. In the last 4 years, that average rate has climbed to 3.5 projects per year. And since 2018, 1 triplex has been constructed and 1 is currently under construction. The committee also requested basic renderings of two potential outcomes of the R1 zoning, and this will be shared later in the presentation. In November 2023, the province of BC introduced Bill 44, small-scale multi-unit housing, which requires qualifying municipalities in the province to amend zoning bylaws in order to increase the minimum density standards by allowing more small-scale multi-unit housing options in land use zones that are otherwise restricted to single-family dwellings or duplexes. Staff have drafted zoning bylaw amendments based on the recommendations in the provincial policy guidance on small-scale multi-unit housing. The provincial policy guidance is to make zoning regulations as flexible as possible to facilitate the development of small-scale multi-unit housing. Bylaw number 3036/2024 proposes to replace the RS1, RS1A, RS2, RS2A, RS3, and RMH2 zoning in the majority of the district with a new R1 zone. Areas subject to high flood hazard or debris flow hazard are not subject to this amendment, and staff are seeking an exemption to the Bill 44 requirements to increase densities in these areas. Staff will bring forward appropriate zoning for these areas as part of a separate update to the zoning bylaw, as this involves a significant amount of work with a flood hazard consultant that cannot be completed before the June 30th deadline to adopt the Bill 44 zoning bylaw updates. So some changes to the amending bylaw since the April 9th Committee of the Whole meeting include changes to section 4.38, which regulates accessory dwelling units or ADUs. In order to further increase design flexibility, the maximum size of an ADU has been increased from 50 square meters to 90 square meters on any property. Previously, 90 square meter ADUs were only permitted on properties 0.2 hectares or larger. The maximum of 1 ADU per property has been removed. This would allow for more than 1 ADU on a property. However, the 90 square meter total maximum floor area would still apply regardless of the number of ADUs. This is also intended to increase design flexibility and incentivize ADUs. A provision noting that a 90 square meter maximum gross floor area for an ADU located on a property in the Agricultural Land Reserve has been added to align with the Agricultural Land Commission regulations. And changes were also made to remove floor area ratios for multiple dwelling residential use and the minimum setbacks in the R1 zone, but these changes will be discussed later in this presentation. So highlights of the amendments that were previously presented at the Committee of the Whole meeting include adding a definition of multiple dwelling residential to the zoning bylaw, which means a physical arrangement of 3 or more attached dwelling units. Multiple dwelling residential is included as a permitted use in the new R1 zone, as are single unit and 2 unit dwellings. Section 4.38 accessory dwelling units is further amended to reduce the required setbacks and increase the permitted height from 6.7 meters to a maximum of 8 meters. This will increase design flexibility for ADUs. Section 4.52 was added to the general regulations to regulate small-scale multi-unit housing to permit a 2-unit dwelling in any comprehensive development zone or rural residential zone that meets the following criteria. The zone permits a single-unit dwelling, is serviced by municipal water and sanitary services, and is not located within the Agricultural Land Reserve. This is intended to meet the provincial requirement by allowing up to 4 dwelling units, a 2-unit dwelling with a secondary suite on each side, on lots zoned for single unit dwellings. Staff have taken this approach with CD and RL zones to ensure the provincial requirements are being met without modifying those zones because that approach presents an administrative challenge. Given that the CD zones were drafted for specific developments, there is a risk that applying the R1 zone to certain areas of these zones would create unintended nonconformance with zoning. And for the RL zones, there are a limited number of rural residential properties in the district that would meet the above noted criteria, most of which are located in the Loggers East neighborhood, which has a recently completed neighborhood plan and are likely to redevelop at higher densities than permitted in R1. A new zone, Residential 1, will be added to the zoning bylaw and will replace RS1, RS2, and RS3 zoning in the majority of the district. Permitted uses in the R1 zone include single unit dwelling, 2-unit dwelling, and multiple dwelling residential. The minimum lot size in R1 remains the same as in RS1 and RS2. The maximum height for a single or 2-unit dwelling remains the same as RS1 and RS2 at 9 meters. The maximum height for multiple dwelling residential is 11 meters or 3 stories, whichever is less, which is based on the recommendations of the provincial policy guidance. Maximum lot coverage for single or 2-unit dwellings remains at 33%, but increases to 40% if the single unit or 2-unit dwelling contains a suite and an accessory dwelling unit. And lot coverage increases to 50% for multiple dwelling residential use, which is aligned with provincial policy guidance. Density in the R1 zone allows for 4 strata-titled multiple dwelling residential units on a lot and allows for an additional 5th dwelling unit if it is provided as a secondary suite, multi-unit flex unit, or accessory dwelling unit. This additional unit cannot be stratified, which is intended to incentivize a rental unit on the property. The proposed maximum floor area ratio, or FAR, are summarized on this slide. The FAR in the R1 zone increases based on the number of units proposed, with bonus FAR available if a secondary suite, multi-unit flex unit, or ADU is provided for single unit and 2-unit dwellings. Provincial policy guidance does not recommend including an FAR for small-scale multi-unit housing. Previously, staff had recommended including a 0.8 FAR for 3 units with a suite and/or an ADU, and 1.0 for 4 units with a suite and/or an ADU, after reviewing existing townhouse developments and their respective densities. During public engagement, some attendees suggested not including an FAR for multiple dwelling residential use to ensure the regulations are as flexible as possible to facilitate their delivery. Further, discussions with an architect staff retained to prepare conceptual drawings of potential scenarios of the multiple dwelling residential use noted it may be challenging to achieve a 1.0 FAR on most properties. Given this information and to align with provincial policy guidance, staff no longer recommend including an FAR for multiple dwelling residential use. The maximum unit size of 220 square meters is still included for multiple dwelling residential use. The The minimum setbacks in the R1 zone for properties outside of the floodplain are consistent with what was originally presented at the Committee of the Whole meeting and are as follows. Front setback of 3 meters, rear setback of 3 meters, interior side setback of 1.2 meters, and exterior side setback of 3 meters. Provincial policy guidance recommends a minimum front setback of 2 meters and a minimum rear setback of 1.5 meters. Staff have engaged a consultant to determine whether a reduced front and rear setbacks are sufficient to maintain flood conveyance for secondary floodways. Unfortunately, this work was not able to be completed prior to bringing the bylaw forward for readings. And given this work is ongoing, staff are proposing to maintain the same front, rear, and exterior side setback of 7.62 meters that currently exists in RS1 and RS2 and reduce the interior side setback to 1.2 meters. This would be applicable to properties that are located within the floodplain. Staff intend to bring forward an amendment to further reduce the front setback based on the outcome of the work with the flood consultant. Common usable open space is not required in the R1 zone. Staff are proposing a minimum private usable open space requirement of equivalent of at least 10% of the gross floor area of the dwelling unit to be provided as private usable space for multiple dwelling residential use. The 10% requirement mirrors the current private open space requirement in multiple unit residential zones such as RM1 to RM3. There's also an option to provide the same amount of area required for private usable open space as common usable open space to provide increased design flexibility. So this is the first of the 2 scenarios that were modeled for the R1 zoning. The first scenario is a typical Dentville or downtown size lot with vehicle access from a rear lane. This scenario depicts a triplex containing 2 suites with a 0.8 floor area ratio, 50% lot coverage, and 1 parking stall per principal dwelling unit for 3 total, access from the lane. The blue area represents the main dwelling units, brown represents the secondary suites. The ground floor would be crawl space and entry due to flood construction level constraints. Oops. The second is a typical Garibaldi Highlands size lot with access from the street. This is a 4-plex with 1 accessory dwelling unit, a 1.0 floor area ratio, 50% lot coverage, 1 parking stall per unit, access from a shared driveway. It should be noted that for scenario 2, in order to reach the maximum allowable floor area ratio that was previously recommended, the conceptual renderings do not include garages in any of the buildings. Further, a 5.6 meter setback from the side lot lines was required to accommodate driveways to provide access to parking at the rear of the lot. So the second bylaw amendment that's part of the Bill 44 zoning bylaw update is the Bill 44 parking reductions. So changes that have been made to this bylaw since the Committee of the Whole meeting include an amendment to section 4.49, which regulates affordable housing, to remove the 1 stall per dwelling unit parking requirement associated with it. Given that bylaw number 3035/2024 is proposing to remove the parking requirements for secondary suites, accessory dwelling units, and multi-unit flex units, and given the growing consensus among housing advocates that minimum parking standards are a significant barrier to housing supply, staff recommend also removing the parking requirements for affordable housing use. This is intended to further incentivize the development of affordable rental housing, given the high cost of construction. Also, the district has yet to receive an application taking advantage of the relaxations allowed under section 4.49 since this bylaw was adopted in November 2023, suggesting that further flexibility is required. Highlights of the amendments that were previously presented at the Committee of the Whole meeting that remained the same are eliminating off-street parking requirements for secondary suites, accessory dwelling units, and multi-unit flex units. This is recommended in the provincial policy guidance and supported by staff as a way to continue to incentivize infill rental housing. There is a risk that without any incentive to provide a suite, properties will redevelop with the maximum number of stratified units and no longer provide secondary suites, which would reduce the number of new opportunities for rental housing in neighborhoods. Including a parking requirement of 1 space per principal dwelling unit for multiple dwelling residential use. Provincial policy guidance is to set a maximum parking requirement of 1 space per dwelling unit, but staff are recommending a more conservative approach. Staff believe that the market will continue to provide parking that exceeds this requirement where practical, as units with additional parking stalls are typically more attractive and may sell for a higher amount. As part of the Squamish Housing Action Plan, staff are committed to exploring parking solutions, including eliminating and reducing parking requirements as part of the district's Housing Accelerator Fund commitment. Staff held 2 engagement events on the Bill 44 zoning bylaw update. one in person at the House Sound Brew Pub on April 30th, and another online webinar on May 2nd. The in-person engagement had approximately 30 people attend. Most of the attendees were property owners or builders who were curious about what the R1 zoning would allow on their properties. 2 attendees raised concerns about parking requirements being eliminated for suites. 2 other attendees recommended removing floor area ratios associated with multiple dwelling residential use to make them more viable and align with the provincial policy recommendations. The online webinar had approximately 15 attendees. Questions generally concerned clarification regarding what the regulations would allow and what fees and other servicing and frontage improvement requirements would be applicable for this form of development. Apart from the above noted comments, there were no major issues raised with the draft bylaws at either event. Notice of bylaw readings were advertised in the May 9th and 16th editions of the Squamish Chief. So staff are recommending that the bylaw number 3036, which is the small scale multi-unit housing, be given first, second, and third reading, and that the Bill 44 parking reductions bylaw number 3035 2024 be given first, second, and third readings. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for that. Council, questions? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. Sorry. So current recommendation, current bylaw that you are that is being proposed includes 1 parking stall per MDR, or does not include a requirement for 1 stall per MDR?
Through the chair, it includes a requirement of 1 stall per MDR use.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
From time to time, staff refer to consultation with the development community. And of course, we have a few prominent developers engaged in large projects. My question is, do staff have kind of a mechanism to field input from small developers? We're talking here tonight about, well, we've referred to the low uptake with respect to triplexes and this category. And some of these developers putting together a plan for a 4-unit development, they're in a different situation than somebody planning for 50. And I'm just wondering, what is the mechanism that staff have to field input, get their feedback on what the challenges are from the small developer? Thank you.
Through the chair, there were a few smaller developers that attended the in-person engagement, and they generally noted that they were supportive of the changes, though they felt they probably didn't go far enough to make it totally economically viable. And I think the best way to solicit feedback from them would be once the zoning is in place and we see some applications to come forward and start to see what challenges people are facing with the zoning regulations and what is working and what is not.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stoner, then Hamilton.
Thank you. Through the chair, a few questions for staff. So picking up on some of the challenges that we've seen for folks to take advantage of the triplex and duplexes that have already been zoned. Can staff speak to the fees and costs incurred for frontage improvements and servicing for single dwelling units and 2 dwelling units versus multi-dwelling residential units, and how we might address that if that is currently beyond the scope of the work that we're talking about tonight?
Through the chair, it's quite challenging to speak to the specific fees that are incurred because they can vary by neighborhood, but typically full frontage improvements aren't required for single unit and potentially 2-unit dwellings. So there can be fairly significant frontage improvements that get triggered through triplex or 4-plex dwelling units. But actually specifically speaking to the fees that are charged is quite challenging because the requirements to do the frontage improvements live in the subdivision and development control bylaw, and then the engineering staff work with the engineers from the team to develop cost estimates and then take bonding for this work. And I'll pass it to Jessie if she would like to add anything.
Thank you, Ryan. Just to add on to that, so speaking with the engineering department, everything duplex and above does require a servicing agreement, and a large portion of those fees are frontage improvements. Those are looked at a case-by-case basis. We've heard the estimate around $250,000 in terms of both underground and frontage improvements for something along those lines. Again, it depends neighborhood to neighborhood what's existing and what's in the subdivision development control bylaw. And we add what triplexes at this time are only permitted on corner lots, which includes 2 frontages, which is why the costs associated with that are typically larger.
That's helpful context. Thank you. Is there any intention through the Squamish Housing Action Plan to address that or review those fees, or is that just kind of expected to stay as is?
Through the mayor, one of our projects as part of the Squamish Housing Action Plan is student infrastructure review in the community over the next 3 years. And so part of that will be better able to address those up front or give people more of an idea of what those are as well. The engineering department is continually reviewing their servicing requirements and coming up with a matrix about what should apply where. So it's an ongoing project.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then I have some specific questions on the draft bylaw that's in front of us. I'll start with section 6, so the new residential 1 R1 zone. We haven't explicitly included permitted uses of childcare, home occupation residential, and home occupation office, which were previously included in the RS1 zone. Can staff speak to why those aren't identified specifically here as permitted uses?
Yeah, through the mayor, those are considered accessory uses, and they're regulated through the general regulations section of the zoning bylaw under section 4. So they have their own specific subsections, and the regulations live there, and they're considered accessory to residential use.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. My other question was in section 4.38, so the changes to the accessory dwelling unit components of the bylaw. I'm just wondering if we should mirror. So in section A, we don't specifically call out 2 dwelling units, but we do so in the secondary suites component. I'm just wondering if that was intentional for that to be differentiated.
Through the mayor, yes, there was consideration to call out both, but given that this multiple dwelling residential zone is going to replace all of RS1, 2, and 3, a single unit dwelling is going to be a permitted use, so it would still be applicable.
Would the same thing not then apply for the secondary suites? Same rationale. It just seems inconsistent between the two.
Yes, I see what you're saying. However, the issue there was that it called out zones that permitted single unit dwelling, but there are legally non-conforming zones, or sorry, there's zones that have single family homes on them that are not zoned for single family use, so it wouldn't allow for a suite there. But yes, so the intention there was to allow people with existing homes to add a suite to them, but potentially not add a carriage home, because that would further, that would kind of make the nonconformance even worse than it typically is, if that makes sense. Adding a suite to your home felt that an existing home felt like it was a reasonable thing to allow.
Okay. And then in that same section 4.38E, it currently reads meet the minimum from the side and side setbacks requirements for the zone's principal building and not be located no closer than 1.5 meters, which just feels like it doesn't read very clearly. What was the intention behind E?
It was drafted to mirror the previous, the way it was previously written. And my apologies, as someone who reads the zoning bylaw very often, it seemed clear to me, but it might not be the easiest thing to read when you're reading it.
So what does not be sorry, it says not be located no closer than 1.5 meters. What does that mean?
In the bylaw that I've pulled up from the agenda, it reads, from a zone's principal building and not be located closer than 1.5 meters from a rear lot line, except from where a rear lot line abuts a lane. The setback may be reduced to 0.61 meters. That, if you're looking in the track changes section, it might have been an error on my part.
Yeah, I was looking at the track changes. Thank you. Chair, if I may, just one more.
Yep,
I'll
go
jump to
ahead.
the off-street parking requirements, section 4.17. I'm just curious, as we move towards reducing this requirement for parking for multiple dwelling residential, why haven't we considered reducing the parking requirements for duplexes or even single unit housing to one parking space, especially given how few duplexes we've seen emerge in the past 10 years?
Through the mayor, the intention of providing a reduced parking standard for the multiple dwelling residential use and removing it for suites, accessory dwelling units, and multi-unit flex units was seen as a way to try and incentivize this new form of housing, which is missing from the community, and to really facilitate its development. So that was the rationale for not further reducing the parking standards for single or two-unit dwellings.
Would two-unit dwellings not fall under that same category?
If I could answer through the mayor, we don't see the challenges that we would see with a triplex or a fourplex on a standard property to provide parking in a single unit or a two-unit dwelling. They become real challenges when it's a triplex or a fourplex.
Hey, you're okay for now, Councillor Stoner?
I guess a follow-up question though, but by requiring 2 parking stalls per duplex unit, we are requiring that cost on that form of development. Is that not true?
That's correct. It certainly has the cost. It's just that it hasn't been identified as an insurmountable cost that would prevent or make development unfeasible. Whereas in triplex and fourplex form, it seems to be. But again, this is our first step into reducing parking requirements. So we're not going all the way. We're providing some, and we're going to monitor. And if council approves this, we'll probably come back with further reduction proposals in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hamilton next.
Thanks. Thinking about parking requirements, so just to be clear, the province is suggesting a maximum parking requirement. Is that in our bylaw? Is that correct?
Through the mayor, the provincial policy guidance suggests a maximum of 1 stall per unit.
And this got me thinking about if somebody wants to own a property in Squamish but doesn't own a car, do we have in our bylaw, do we have any mechanism for somebody to build a property with no parking? Or do all of the zones, does everything for purchase require a parking stall?
Through the mayor, currently, yes. However, you could apply for a variance to the zoning bylaw to vary a parking requirement.
Thanks. And you've said, I'm pretty sure I read in the staff report that we haven't seen anybody try to reduce the number of parking stalls from the minimum requirement in these single family or multi-unit triplex units, right? So our minimum is effectively an artificial minimum at this point because the market doesn't build them that way anyways. Do I understand the comment from the staff report properly?
And Mayor, I think that's maybe that's not exactly what the comment was intended to get at, but that would likely be accurate because they always meet we don't see parking variances very often for single unit or 2-unit dwelling developments.
Yeah, thanks. That's such a way. We don't see a lot of people asking to reduce to no parking, right? Okay. Thanks. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, we have a recommendation before us. Again, as with the others, we have these in 2 pieces. So the first piece on our agenda is the Bill 44 parking reduction piece. Is someone ready to move that, if that's where we are, or are there more questions? Moved by Councillor French. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Anderson. Thank you. Any comments on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have the next piece is the small scale multi-unit housing piece. Yeah, are you moving that, Councillor Hamilton?
I'd like to move it with an amendment.
Yeah, give it a go.
Thanks very much. So I just need to find, I can tell you the spirit of the amendment, and then I just need to find the exact where it is. So the spirit of the amendment is to remove the parking minimum on multi-dwelling residential units, so that there would be rather.
That was
in this bylaw.
It's in. Okay, so that was the part, that was the previous. These are connected, that's why they're presented together, but that particular piece was the one that just went. So we're looking for the small scale multi-unit housing. So this is number 3036, 2024, which I will move if there's a seconder. Second by Councillor French. Thank you. Any comments on this one? I will just briefly, all of this work is flowing from provincial push to streamline housing, and I commend staff for their work in wading through these asks from the province and turning it into actionable items. And I do recognize, and I think it's largely recognized even at the provincial level, that these are an evolving landscape and will likely need to be revisited as we monitor the impact of these going forward. So thank you for that. And Councillor Hamilton.
A point of clarification. This bylaw, including in section 6A11, off-street parking, states off-street parking spaces for buildings and uses must comply with section 41 of this bylaw. Section 41 of this bylaw is the thing that holds that piece that I want to alter, which is a table that states how many parking stalls are expected per housing form.
Staff could chime in on this one to provide some clarity.
That's correct. And I mean, technically, I think I know the amendment that you're getting at. You'd like the MDR parking to be 1 stall per unit. Oh, 0. Okay. You could amend this section 6A11 to say, have subsection A say all off-street parking spaces for buildings and uses must comply with section 41 of this bylaw. And then you could add a B that says, despite section 41, there's no parking requirement for MDR use. And then we would have to amend the table at a future zoning bylaw amendment to clean it up. That's not really the cleanest way to do it.
There's a path there if you would choose to take that.
I don't see nope, I won't take that path. Unfortunately, I thought that we were coming in 6A11. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to make a big difference on the development. I do hope it's something that staff can seriously consider in bringing these forward. Parking is a significant cost, and I believe people in Squamish should be able to purchase properties without parking if they choose.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this? Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Unfortunate that I was also following the staff report in terms of the order of the bylaws being presented and not the agenda. So I feel like that's a bit of a missed opportunity in terms of addressing the number of parking units for multiple dwelling residential and removing that minimum. I do concur with my council colleague, Councillor Hamilton, that there should be an opportunity for folks to be able to purchase property without a parking stall if that's something that they so desire. But I did hear from staff that they would be pursuing more broad amendments to the parking regulations, and so I'm happy to wait for that. More broadly on the Bill 44 amendments, I want to thank staff for their due diligence and their work for the quick turnaround and timeline to get this done based on provincial legislation. I do think that hopefully it helps to open up a few opportunities for some of the missing middle forms that we've seen and so desperately asked the building community for over the last handful of years. I am concerned that it probably won't go far enough. I think the stats that staff provided over the last 10 years really show that there's some big gaps in terms of actually being able to make these projects work, especially the triplexes or beyond. So I also look forward to some of the work on the infrastructure review and the fees and charges components that we can try and make these more viable so that folks have different forms of housing available to them within our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I appreciate the work staff has done and the efforts we're making to provide more housing options. I am supportive of my colleagues where my colleague was attempting to go. I think it would make sense, you know, the province is moving quickly, adjusting things fast, and so maybe that's our opportunity to do the same and do this maybe in a more clean way that gets all the pieces. But I think it does make sense to follow, even if we can't get quite to the provincial guidance of maximums, at least removing some more of our minimums, especially in particular opportunities of affordability makes sense. The only other thing that sort of jumped out at me that I'm still struggling with is, you know, trying to make sure these ADUs actually become rentals and so on. And I realize there's a lot of competing things there. So I sort of settled on trying this out as it is, but you know, there's a piece of me that wishes we could just zone residential tenancy or somehow make a residential tenancy requirement, but I understand then maybe people don't build them and so on. So that's the one piece where I have some hesitation here, or the one other piece. But other than that, I'm, you know, comfortable supporting this, seeing where it gets to, and then again, assuming, much like the province, we will be agile and adjust these as we see what opportunities there are.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So the next item we have is District of Squamish zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw regarding short-term rental accommodation definition. And there's a few under this category. And council, we'll go through this batch and I think we've earned a quick recess and then we'll reconvene.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Asia Philp, planner with the Community Development Department, and tonight I'll be presenting on several short-term rental program bylaw amendments, as well as 2 zoning bylaw clarification amendments for consideration of readings. So as part of the Year 3 short-term rental program review, which happened back in February of this year, Council directed staff to 1, change the definition of short-term rental accommodation from a rental period of less than 30 days to a period of less than 90 days in order to align Squamish's definition of short-term rental with the province's Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act definition. And second, increase the municipal ticket information bylaw fine amount from 500 up to 3,000 per infraction per day to strengthen one of our STR compliance and enforcement tools. So staff are now bringing these amendments forward to fulfill Council's direction. As a second separate item, staff are bringing forward 2 zoning bylaw amendments as part of the continual process of updating the zoning bylaw for corrections, clarifications, and alignment with our other district policies. The first amendment is to update the I-10 zone with the civic address and location map for 2543 Mamquam Road. And this is shown in the upper map on our slide here. This property was resurveyed several years ago, and this changed the legal description of the property. And we need to make this amendment for clarification purposes. The second amendment is to increase the residential rental tenure requirement in Area 3 of the UH1 zone from 10% up to 30% in order to align the requirement with other multiple unit sites in the UH1 zone. So staff recommend that council give first, second, and third reading to the 3 STR-related amendment bylaws to update the definition of short-term rental accommodation and to increase the fine amount. Staff further recommend that council give first, second, and third reading to the 2 clarification amendment bylaws for 2543 Mamquam Road and for Area 3 of the University neighborhood. So that concludes my quick presentation, and I'll pass it back to the chair for questions and discussion.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Hamilton to start us off with this one.
Thanks. Just a question of clarification that the zone in the UH1, and I hope that staff can answer this. Does Capilano University own any of that land? If so, I will recuse myself from that decision.
Through the mayor, no, they do not.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Questions, council? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I just on the Paco Road piece, I guess I was a little bit confused because our intent was to have this stay, I think, as an industrial zone, but we're bumping up against issues because there's so much residential there, it seems, and so I'm just wanting to ask, have we sort of gotten off track inadvertently through the caretaker suites and turn this into a de facto sort of primarily residential area when it's meant to be industrial? And so is this change that's proposed actually the one we need? I guess was sort of what I was wondering.
Yeah, through the chair. So I was the planner that ran the Paco rezoning in 2016, 2017. And this was the only property in that neighborhood. And it was in discussion with the landowners and the other users in that neighborhood that we landed on for this property only, having a caretaker suite for each individual industrial unit above each unit.
You okay for now, Councillor Pettingill? Okay, I'll go to Councillor Stoner online.
Thank you, through the chair. Appreciate the intent to align the definition of short-term rental with the provincial one for 90 days. And my apologies, I wasn't there when this came to committee of the whole. What consideration has been given for the we know that there's a number of folks in our community who look for that kind of medium-term rental, whether they're here as locums for doctors, transitioning into a job. What is the risk of increasing this from 30 days to 90 days for making that more difficult for folks to establish in community?
Through the chair, I'll take an initial stab at this. So folks will still be able to, if it's not in a suite or a coach house, they can come in and get a short-term rental license. They can list on Airbnb for any length of days that they would like to, and somebody could choose to rent for more than 30 days or 30 days. And then they can also, the other option, if it's a suite or a coach house, is that they can go through the provincial tenancy agreement and go into a fixed term rental agreement for somebody.
Thank you for that clarity.
Thank you. Other questions, council? Okay, we have, and just learning from the last piece. We're going to go through these in the order they appear in the agenda package, just so that we're all on the same page. At least that's my preferences as chair. So if there's no further questions on this, we can move through those. So the first one being District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011 amendment bylaw, which is the short-term rental accommodation definition bylaw, number 3042. Is there a mover for that? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is the District of Squamish business license bylaw for the short-term, and this relates to the short-term rental accommodation definition contained there. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have the District of Squamish municipal ticket information bylaw, number 1832. And this is an amendment bylaw regarding the short-term rental fine increase. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Stoner, I just saw your hand. Did you want to comment on this particular piece, or were you moving?
I was just going to comment really briefly, if that's all right, before you call the question. Just generally on these amendments, and want to thank the province for enabling these. I think one of the challenges that we've had with our short-term rentals has been around enforcement and regulation, and this goes hand in hand with some of the efforts that the province is doing in terms of centralizing some of that. So I think that this makes good use of our staff resources and helps us advance our chosen solutions for our community in terms of prioritizing long-term rental over short-term rental. So I'm curious to see how effective this is, but I think that this is a good use of our staff time and our effort here. So thanks for the work.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. So next we have the amendment bylaw, and this is the one for 2543 Malcolm Road. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2200/2011 amendment bylaw, and this is the university amendments, as noted, which is number 3083/2024. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to take a quick recess. And before we do that, I'd just like to provide some clarity as to the ordering of the agenda going forward. So what we'll do is I'd like to move that we adjust the order of the agenda so that item 19 can be will be dealt with, which is unscheduled public attendance, which will be dealt with following item 12. So 19 will go in between 12 and 13. If there's a seconder for that, and that will give opportunity to address the letters before they get to us. That makes sense, everybody? Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. So that's where that'll sit. We've got a few things to get through until then, but we'll take a quick break. So we'll come back in 10 minutes. And we'll continue where we left off with the tree management bylaw. Thank you. We're now in recess. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We'll call this meeting back to order. We're now on to item 25 under this section, which is a District of Squamish tree management bylaw. And we have some staff to speak to the presentation, I believe.
We do. We just had a technical challenge, and Ms. Foster ran off to reload the presentation. So she should be back momentarily. There she is.
We do have other, we can, if you need another little bit of time, we can do some adoptions maybe to buy you some time to get loaded in there. Okay, so council, if everyone's agreeable to that, we'll move on to adoption. And so this is adopting the regulations that we gave 3 readings to earlier this evening, the ones that we could. So let's go through that. First on this is the District of Squamish zoning bylaw. It's the amendment bylaw for 37940 4th Avenue. Moved by Councillor French, thank you. Seconded by, I'll second that. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries, thank you. And now we're on to the zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw. This is the Bill 44 parking reductions. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And now we're on to the zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw. This is regarding short-term rental accommodation definition, and this is bylaw number 3042-2024. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by someone. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. 2 more of these. We have the zoning bylaw. This is the amendment bylaw pertaining to 2543 Malcolm Road. Moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the final one is the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw. And this is the university amendments, as it was referred to, which is number 3083-2024. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Did we buy you enough time? All right. We are back to District of Squamish tree management bylaw. And I will turn it over to staff to introduce themselves and take us through the presentation.
Good evening. My name is Jordan Foster. I'm the manager of the Environmental Services Department. I'm sitting here with Aaron Urton, Environmental Specialist with the Environmental Services Department. We're going to present to you the minor bylaw amendments to the tree management bylaw. So the District of Squamish Tree Management Bylaw number 264028 was adopted on October 23rd, 2018. The minor amendments include amendments to the definition, a few terms, mainly positions and titles, and then just some minor housekeeping revisions. The recommended amendments that we provided were revising the definitions to meet those cited in the OCP so that they all align, removing definitions mentioned within the bylaw, adding necessary or that were not mentioned within the bylaw, and adding the ones that were mentioned in the bylaw but not currently defined, as well as just general housekeeping such as grammar, revising staff titles, and referencing our new invasive species bylaw, which came out after this bylaw. As well, clarifying the language in section 4.1, which was unclear. We were having, some clarity concerns when we were working through that section with community members, so we wanted to make it more easily interpretable.
I also wanted to take this opportunity to mention that we are going to have more education and engagement opportunities next year. Although these minor bylaw amendments are coming out this year, we will be doing more engagement for possible tree bylaw amendments in the year 2025 to align with current best management practices, environmental standards, and just community priorities. So I want to take this opportunity to update council that this is something that is on our agenda for the coming year, that these minor amendments are purely housekeeping, but we plan to do more community engagement for the tree bylaw. So the staff recommendation currently is that District of Squamish Tree Management Bylaw number 2640 2018, Amendment Bylaw number 3034 be given first 3 readings.
Thank you. Council, any questions on this piece? With the knowledge that we have a more fulsome update that's in the works, so thank you for that piece. Seeing no questions, we do have a recommendation before us, moved by Councillor Anderson and seconded by Councillor French. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Anderson?
Yes, I just have one comment to make, and it is a comment rather than a question because wasn't prepared well enough for a question. But I'm looking forward to that education engagement opportunity program that you have suggested will be taking place next year. I do from time to time field all kinds of inquiries and interest. You see it in social media about what to do with trees, and I'm sure that this program will be addressing that. One thing I just wanted to mention, though, is that the recent heritage conservation strategy that was presented to us earlier this year did note that perhaps this bylaw should be or can be or might be the home for consideration of heritage trees. That may not be the case, but I would hope that this opportunity next year or the bylaw amendment, there might possibly be an opportunity to consider this. A heritage tree bylaw was first raised back in the late 90s, and we still have yet to attend to it. And there are some trees, and they receive lots of discussion and attention, and they're well protected because we all know about them and care about them. But we do need to address this, and this might be an opportunity to at least discuss that matter next year. Looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this, Councillor French?
Thank you, Mayor. And just speaking in support, the changes here are minor and very easy to support. And one of the heritage trees that Councillor Anderson refers to is less than a block away from my house. I support his thoughts on that as a potential element of the work that is coming to us, the more significant changes on the way next year.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, happy to support the motion on the floor. I think the amendments make good sense. Thanks for doing the housekeeping that's necessary to make sure that our bylaws are as clear and consistent and efficient in terms of actually implementing them as possible. I think the changes that are made for the designated authorities also make good sense within this. So thanks for doing that work. And for the sneak peek on what's coming up next year, because like my fellow council colleagues, French and Anderson, I also get lots of questions around the tree management bylaw. So I think it's a due time to review how it's been implemented since we first adopted it in 2018. So looking forward to that work. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councillor Prendergast.
Yeah, I'll support this as well. I, to be honest, when I first read this, I misread parts of it, and I had a lot more concerns than I do now after a closer second reading. I'm comfortable with these changes, but I, again, will reiterate what my colleagues have said, that it's clear our community sees trees as incredibly valuable, as they should. I think, it was, I believe it was last term we updated the trees and soils bylaw, and there's maybe. It seems that maybe our community is looking for a little more protection for trees, and so it'll be interesting to see how those discussions roll out in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Just speaking in support of the motion, I really appreciate the it's the little things like aligning definitions across documents and all that stuff that are actually big things when you need a regulation such as this. So thank you for these changes. And I look forward to those, the additional work that's underway. And when that comes back to us, we've already heard some great suggestions as to what could be included there, but I know it's a complex topic, and I look forward to engaging with that when the time arises. So thank you very much for everything that you've done on this. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Okay, so next up we have under staff reports from corporate administration, we have a deputy corporate officer appointment. Ms. Wilson, do you have, it says no presentation, just the recommendations there, and you're here to answer questions. Is that how? Great. Okay, so we have a recommendation before us that there's that council appoint Chatandeep Kaur, Information and Privacy Supervisor, as a Deputy Corporate Officer for the District of Squamish. I will move that if there's a seconder. Second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we had no late agenda items or correspondence action requested. This is where we will go to unscheduled public attendance. So Ms. Saxby, thank you for your patience. I know you have 5 minutes to address council.
To acknowledge that there were a lot of people here this evening that have had to leave due to family commitments, but just want to express appreciation to everyone that has come out to stand with me this evening, and to everybody that is still here. I really appreciate them being here for the long haul. To begin, I'd like to sincerely thank you as councillors for voting to deny the temporary use permit for Woodfibre LNG's proposed floating work camp. It takes a lot of courage to stand up to a multi-billion-dollar fossil fuel company. Where other levels of government have failed us, the District of Squamish listened to the community's concerns and held Woodfibre LNG accountable. I am grateful. As I mentioned, I'd like to speak to the 2 items that appear on the District of Squamish agenda this evening, which are correspondence from Woodfibre LNG regarding the temporary use permit for its proposed floating work camp. This is an issue of due process. Woodfibre LNG is trying to circumvent and undermine a democratic decision-making process behind the scenes again. This latest request from Woodfibre LNG for council to reconsider its decision to deny the temporary use permit for its proposed flotel is the farthest thing from a demonstration of functional democracy or procedural fairness. A temporary use permit is a short-term rezoning. While the Woodfibre site is zoned for bulk oil and gas, it is not zoned for housing. The proposed floating work camp does not comply with the official community plan or the current zoning. If it did, a temporary use permit would not be required. As Woodfibre LNG notes in its letter, the only issue before council is whether it should permit a temporary residential use at the site to permit workers to reside there. This is a discretionary decision, which means that council is under no obligation to approve Woodfibre LNG's flotel or to reconsider the decision that it has made. After listening to 6 hours of oral submissions and receiving hundreds of written submissions, the District of Squamish Council voted to reject the recommendation of staff to issue the TUP for a housing facility at the Woodfibre site. The community charter dictates that council must not receive new information between a public hearing and a decision. If you do, the decision may be invalidated. The letter from Woodfibre LNG acknowledges this problem, where it states, "This correspondence is not meant to introduce new information outside a public hearing, but to respond to concerns raised during the meeting." Regardless of their intent, new information is new information in the context of the public hearing and the council decision. This request by Woodfibre LNG is at best presumptuous. At worst, it may be an attempt to invalidate the council decision or create a pathway for legal action. Making a new decision after the public hearing and after accepting new information leaves it subject to review. This is one of the few bases on which these decisions are overturned, precisely because it is unfair. Woodfibre LNG has an opportunity to do the right thing and work with the District of Squamish to address the community's concerns and complete the assessments that are essential to properly evaluate whether this floating work camp is in the best interests of the community of Squamish and safe for Woodfibre LNG's workers. Instead, the company is showing its true colours by resorting to pressure tactics, misinformation, and threats of litigation. The onus is on the District of Squamish as a regulator to ensure you have thorough and adequate information prior to making a decision and to ensure your decision is reasonable based on facts, not promises. No one else is looking out for the best interests of Squamish except for you, our local elected leaders, not the provincial or federal regulators, and certainly not Woodfibre LNG. Minister Josie Osborne has indicated that the province won't interfere with this decision, saying, "I encourage the company to continue to work with the district to get them the information they need." We encourage Woodfibre LNG to do that too. We believe the appropriate next step should be for staff to seek clarity from council on how to proceed in light of the letter, for council to direct staff to inform Woodfibre LNG that the decision on the temporary use permit is firm, for council to contemplate whether they want to direct Woodfibre LNG to continue the conversation about the flotel through a new application for a temporary use permit or through the official community plan and zoning bylaw application process. And if so, for council to direct staff on what it wants to see addressed in a new temporary use application or official community plan and zoning bylaw amendment application. Woodfibre would then engage with district staff to address the issues raised by the council and the community through these new applications. Staff would then report back to council on what they are hearing from Woodfibre LNG, and council would then direct staff on how to move forward with a range of issues. And staff would move forward with Woodfibre LNG as directed by council and report back for direction along the way. We asked you to...
You're just a touch over 5. If you could
wrapping up.
Include it, and then we can.
We ask you to consider this and to very seriously weigh any reconsideration of the decision that you've already made. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission. Appreciate that. Council, our next piece of business is correspondence referred from the consent agenda. And I think the best way to address that is in the order that they were listed in the agenda package originally, which would have the letter 7B2, the Transportation Action British Columbia piece, to be dealt with first. I think was it Councillor Anderson? Did you pull that one? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm highlighting this letter from the Transport Action British Columbia, it's concerning restoring passenger rail service in the Sea to Sky corridor. The letter refers to a report that is co-published by the BC Federation of Labour and the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and I wish to recommend it to my colleagues. It's called Connecting BC. It's easy to access, Connecting BC, and it's a review, very broad brush review of investments that have been proposed, discussed for a long time, and are being advocated for not only in the Sea to Sky corridor, but province-wide for bus services, Highway 16 here, rail services, and also ferry. And what I wish to highlight is that we all need to work ongoing in raising our own literacy levels, if you like, or awareness of these proposals and what's involved with them. For this corridor, we talk about it all the time, regional transit. But I'd like to highlight something that doesn't come up in the Connecting BC report because it's a little down to more of the details, and that is passenger rail in this corridor for commuting purposes will be very expensive. And I have full sympathy with the people of Lillooet trying to encourage investment in passenger rail to the north of us. I was a frequent flyer on the Lillooet run years ago, used it quite often. It was very convenient. There was no bus service to Lillooet even back then. But south of us on Howe Sound corridor will be very, very expensive for passenger rail. I'd like to suggest in closing that the fact to all of us should be aware of that to have a fast ferry service, which would be quicker than any rail service could possibly be, would cost tens of millions. Passenger rail upgrade along Howe Sound will cost hundreds of millions. So I'm just doing my part here that we should all be raising our awareness and literacy on these matters, these important matters, and ferry needs to be in focus for Howe Sound. Thank you. Read Connecting BC. It's an excellent summary report.
Thank you very much for that. And is there a specific action? I'll go around the table, but I'm looking for a specific action on this. If you have a follow up, or if it's move receipt, I'll go around for other comments and I'll come back to you if that's okay. Go ahead, Councillor.
I was simply going to suggest that I move receipt.
Okay. That's what you were looking for here? Okay. Yep. So with that, we have it moved by Councillor French and second by Councillor Anderson, receipt of this letter. And it is quite an interesting piece of work. So thank you for taking this opportunity to speak to it and ongoing dialogue of transportation in the corridor. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So next we're on to item 7B3, which is the letter from Ms. Kennedy titled Application for Temporary Use Permit. Who was that? I pulled this one. I think these two are this letter and the third item are linked quite clearly, and I want to give opportunity for council to discuss the contents of these. So and as well as for them to appear on an official agenda so that everyone can see what so it can be read into the public record. So other comments on these in particular? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. So the letter 7B3 is a letter from WLNG referring to the deposit amount that was a primary decision point for me in our April 30th decision. It was a sticking point for me in my decision to not support the awarding of the temporary use permit 76. The reason why that is so important to me is that we have a responsibility to hold proponents accountable. And I believe that the change from $2 million to $10 million gives us that leverage, gives us that opportunity to hold WLNG accountable for their actions and their sticking to the terms of the TUP. So I'll leave it to any other council colleagues if they have any other comments. Should they not have any comments, I'll have one further motion to put forward.
Thank you. Any other comments on any pieces of these two pieces of correspondence? Seeing none.
Thank you. I'd like to put forward a motion to reconsider the April 30th decision on TUP 76.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor French seconds. Would you like to speak to it?
I suppose a considerable amount of me speaking to this was my preamble. A key piece of my decision is our ability to hold the proponent accountable for the promises they make in the TUP. By increasing the amount to a point where it is a meaningful it is a meaningful amount. We have a lever to hold the proponent accountable to the promises they make. And that's a key piece for me.
Okay, thank you. And to be clear for everybody, the discussion right now is whether this item comes back for reconsideration. And if this motion passes, we'll have a conversation around what that actually looks like. This isn't voting on the permit itself at this point, just to be extra clear for everybody. I've got councillors, actually, I'll go to the seconder. Do you want to speak to this? No, I've got Councillor Stoner with her hand up.
Thank you. Through the chair, I won't be supporting the motion on the floor as my council colleague has presented it. While I appreciate the additional information and contribution that Wood Fibre LNG is proposing in this letter in terms of a security, which I do think goes some way in addressing some of the concerns that I heard from council colleagues and the community about the temporary use permit, it doesn't address some of the other outstanding issues with respect to condition 14 of the EA certificate or the hazards assessment, which I still consider as necessary. And I think from a procedural standpoint, the applicant and the proponent have an opportunity to reapply with some additional information, including the security deposit, and it would be a cleaner process to do it that way than to try and introduce new information post-public hearing. So my vote would be that we hold with the decision that has been made and the proponent reapply with a new temporary use permit with changes in the context of that application, if that's what they so choose to do. But I think that convoluting this process makes it more difficult for all of us around the table, for our community, and for the proponent themselves. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next, I've got Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. I also won't be supporting the motion. I think council made a good decision. The proponent does have the ability to reapply with a different proposal. I think what we heard very clearly from the community was that the community was not satisfied and that the community did not feel this made sense with our OCP and our community expectations. I have numerous concerns in terms of enforcement or compliance with what we see in the EAO conditions, the hazard assessment, a number of other things. And I think the community quite clear has been saying since 2014, so the proponents had a decade, that we need permanent housing. And so I think there are many things to address here. We probably as a council won't ever agree on all the things, but I think if nothing else, we've been shown that this requires more conversation. And I think not just with the proponent, but with the community and with council. And I believe the best way and the cleanest way where we're not sort of trying to lobby one councillor to flip a decision at the last moment, that we actually do what we normally do well as a council is sit together and have a good discussion with all the information we require. Again, that's how we find success as a council, how we found success, how we do things well. The urgency here is only the proponents, and that urgency is the proponents' own making. So as a council, I believe it is our responsibility to take the time to do the proper due diligence and follow a clean, clear process where there isn't questions about did we do the right thing or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on this? Councillor Greenlaw?
Thanks. I also won't be supporting the motion on the floor. I appreciate that there's been an offer to increase the security bond to $10 million. And we learned today that the gender and cultural safety plan has been made publicly available. And I look forward to hearing the feedback about that. I think those are good first steps, but not yet sufficient for me to support the issuance of a TUP. And I would like to see I would have to see the cumulative impact assessment, which again is standard much earlier on in other resource industry sectors. And it's my understanding this has been a consistent request now for 3 councils. The cumulative housing impact, which is a condition of one of their permits, my understanding. The local procurement piece, we're hearing from our business community that they're not being offered those opportunities. The hazard assessment of the Henriette Dam, and further to these comments, I agree with Councillor Stoner with respect to the procedural point that of a reapplication being a cleaner and easier process. And I'd like to reiterate Councillor Pettingill's points about timing. This is not, we are not industry. We do not have the resources or capacity to operate at in a timeline that they are setting an expectation of. And I think it's really important that we do our due diligence. These are big projects coming through our community.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. After ongoing consideration and reflection during recent weeks, my position in support of the TUP application is unchanged. I believe it's the best solution, all things considered, and that it should be implemented with minimal delay. I also feel strongly, as I've spoken to before, that this TUP application should receive focused and uncluttered attention and deliberation. It's too easy to escape into broader issues that that belong elsewhere, behind us and in front of us. I will also make the same points I've made previously, that the WLNG traffic at the Site B Highway 9 intersection, we shouldn't be targeting their use of that intersection. There are other intersection users and issues. For example, Murren Park, all the same issues. So I don't feel that we should be and I understand staff is considering this ongoing and it's an evolving conversation, but look at the whole context of that stretch of highway and the intersection safety issues, not just WLNGs, which is just a minority user of that intersection. I also feel that it's a good idea not to request as a condition of the TUP that the moorings for the vessel, the flotel at Woodfibre, not be removed. That should not be a condition. We may need that again. The past practice at similar facilities like this, you may need to bring back your workforce accommodation for upgrades. It's a large, sophisticated plant that may need new workforce. These are small details, but I feel that we shouldn't overlook them in considering the provisions of the TUP. Thank you.
Thank you. In my time in this chamber, we've had this mechanism has existed at every decision that we make. There is opportunity for the mayor or someone that voted in the majority of a decision to bring something back for reconsideration. This mechanism has only been used once that I can remember, very early in last term by Mayor Elliott. So I really struggle with this particular concept. I think on one hand, we have a democratic process that includes this mechanism to ensure that members of council can revisit a decision if they felt that they were challenged to arrive at an appropriate decision for them, which is part of the democratic process. I also agree with, I hear my my council colleagues that spoke to a cleaner process being a new application. My preference for that is that I think the path through this is the cleanest one is a new application. That said, I will support my council colleague in his motion for reconsideration, this as it is piece of our democratic process. Now, as to what the outcome of that is, that remains to be seen through the rest of our process. But I will support the motion for that reason. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? We've got Councillor Stoner, Pettingill, Greenlaw opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. So next step is to understand when and how this, what this looks like going forward. So maybe I'll look to staff for guidance as to, this is uncharted territory. So going forward, this isn't something we're going to discuss. I don't feel that that this meeting is the time to discuss this. So I'd like to refer that. My intention would be to refer this to a future meeting. I'd look to staff to advise us as to what the most appropriate destination is for that. And I'll look to Ms. Wells.
Sorry, my mic walked away. So the best practice would be for council to defer this to a future meeting and give notice of consideration of the decision, reconsideration of the decision regarding the TUP, which is required under the Local Government Act. So my recommendation would be that this be referred to the June 4th council meeting and that we publish notice in 2 consecutive issues of the chief to meet the required notice requirements under the Local Government Act.
Okay, questions? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
So my understanding was that we weren't to talk about the mechanism in the first motion, but some people have talked about new information. We have an additional requirement in our procedures bylaw that council is to receive no submissions. And so I think there's a whole discussion about a public hearing. It is my reading, clear reading of our rules that we require a new public hearing. I think, you know, we have received new information. The proponent has tied it to the TUP and sort of explicitly said they're trying to avoid the public process. But I think our bylaws are very clear. Public process is required here. And so I guess I'm looking to guidance about how we ensure we're having a public hearing if we have to go to, and how we're dealing also with all the many questions council had because of the last public hearing or the last decision. We were missing all kinds of information. So are we just meant to go without all that info now, or how do we manage all that?
So, yeah, thank you. I think that your assessment of new submissions, I agree with. And for those in the audience or watching from home or revisiting this recording, the general practice is that we don't receive any emails, any conversation in public after public hearing before a decision. And given that was the practice in the gap between the public hearing and the initial decision. So I think, and since that time, I'm sure we've all received many hundreds of emails, both from those supporting the project and those opposing the project, that generally we wouldn't in another situation. So I do think that that a public hearing needs to be part of the process going forward. So that's a commitment. Now, as to when that happens and what work needs to occur between here and there, that's the piece that remains to be seen. So I think that at this point, I wonder if I'm trying to think of the best path forward here is to defer this to a future meeting, and we need to do some planning work to understand if we do. Is there a COW meeting or two before a public hearing to get this refined to a point where we have a discussion, or what those pieces are? So I think maybe a more general to defer to a future meeting. I appreciate and then we can discuss that by agenda planning next week to understand what that actually looks like, so that we're making the most informed decision on the procedure going forward. Does that seem? Is there an issue? Do you see an issue with that? We heard the notice piece, but.
So you brought it back for reconsideration. The next step is for council to reconsider the motion.
Right. So. Yep.
Question of clarification. To fully reconsider, when we reconsider the motion, the no new information appears, the procedure policy appears to be requiring us to hold a new public hearing before we make the next decision. So if we reconsider the decision, can we reconsider this decision before holding an additional public hearing? That seems to be the question at hand.
So the motion has been brought back for reconsideration. The motion goes back on the floor exactly as it was at the April 30th meeting before council decided on it. That it should be back on the floor as if nothing else had changed, and you shouldn't have received new information, which is of question now. But you still need to vote on the motion as it was. And so the cleanest thing might be to, for example, refer it back to staff and go from there. But as it is, you need to reconsider the motion as it was presented on April 30th without new information or staff discussion or questions.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And the next piece of clarification, do we need the 2 weeks notice period in order to consider a motion, to consider this motion at all, to reconsider the motion?
2 weeks notice is required for, under the Local Government Act, it requires that the notice provisions, the 2 consecutive weeks publication is required of council's decision on the TUP. I can't speak to what council is going to do. If council was, for example, to refer it back to staff before making a final decision on the TUP, I would say that notice will be given of that final decision, a new public hearing, all of those things. If that makes sense.
I think we are into the I wouldn't say uncharted overall, but unfamiliar territory on this. So I think at this point, to my preference would be that we look at that, referring it back to staff now, and then we can deal with the issuance, the notice when we know exactly what, and then we'll have a path forward for that. So I'll make, I think that's the path. Would you like to make that, or Councilor Pettingill?
I don't, maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't believe we can reconsider the motion tonight. That has to be at a future meeting, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. So I was going to refer this matter to staff for, we can schedule it, make sure notice is right. I think I feel like we're wading into making some decisions procedurally that I want to make sure that are handled. So then this can come back. This will appear on a future agenda and in a timely fashion. So that's what we're looking forward to that's what we're looking for is for staff to schedule this at the appropriate time that meets all the obligations. Does that make sense? And I'll make a motion to that effect. So I'll say that at this point in time, I'll refer this matter to staff for scheduling to make sure that all requirements are met as a date for decision, and a path to that decision is established. Is that
For clarification, then you're deferring the application back to staff?
I'd say just the matter of scheduling the reconsideration, so we understand the procedure, what the timeline looks like, and all the rest of it, and then we can communicate that to the community.
Okay.
I think there's a few factors. Just here, I'm hearing. Oh yeah, I see. Thank you, Councillor Stoner. I'll be right with you. I think this feels like we're wading into these just some decisions we need to make sure that we stay on side with. What the timeline is for notice. We have to create the ad. We have to posting, like all these pieces. So I want to make sure that we do that correctly, and that's what I'm looking to do with my my proposal. Councillor Stoner.
Sorry, I'm just a bit confused by the motion. I think that approval of reconsideration puts all this in motion. It directs staff to provide statutory notice of 2 weeks, and then we bring it back for reconsideration on June 4th. That's how it's laid out in the Local Government Act. So I'm just confused why we have another motion on the floor to direct staff to do the same thing that was just approved by council.
Just given the timelines for notice, that's what I was concerned about with putting a date to it. But essentially, yes, that's what needs to be done. And then what happens? and
So how
then
does your motion vary from what we just passed?
I just took the date out just to make sure that we can get the notice. In previous discussions, actually specifically around the notice bylaw, this bit has been challenging with making sure that we can get the notice that we need to the press in time for the printing and so on. So I just want to leave it and make sure that we understand what that is. Do you have concerns there? Or if Ms. Wells, I'm open to that. If you feel like that isn't a concern, and we can commit to that date and a venue and all the things that need to happen for that.
We can meet the notice requirements if it goes to the June 4th meeting.
Okay, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, sorry, and I didn't hear in the motion to reconsider, I didn't actually hear a date. So I don't think we've tied staff's hands to a date. But I think I guess I'm still confused on what the intention of the motion on the floor is.
Was just really was to come up with a motion that drew the conversation that had a clear next step leaving this room, and it may be redundant because that was implied in the first motion. That's fine, but that was what I was looking to do with that. Councillor Hamilton.
So just seeking clarification, would staff need direction in order to bring this back to this motion back for reconsideration in an appropriate timescale, which meets our public notification and public hearing requirements?
I think an appropriate motion would be that council table the motion until the June 4th council meeting, or whichever council meeting they want to bring it to.
Is that your motion, Councillor?
I'll put forward a motion that we table this until the June 4th meeting.
Okay, Councillor Pettingill.
Sorry, you can't reconsider a motion to reconsider. It sounds like we're talking about maybe tabling that motion. I'm not sure what we're talking about tabling now. So
For clarity through the chair, we're tabling the original motion from April 30th. So the original motion was that council not approve the temporary use permit. It would come back on June 4th as that motion for council to consider. So we're tabling the original motion.
And the reason that this needs to happen on this particular matter, although I think you spoke about that inversely, Ms. Wells, there were two motions that night. We're talking about the approval one, not the negative motion that was. So, but the is that there's a notice to there's a requirement for public notice on that this decision is going to be reconsidered. So this isn't something that just happens on a night in the 30-day process. Like, although it could, but I don't think that's like in other circumstances that could happen. In this circumstance, we need to provide notice. So that's the procedural step, and that's why we need the time. So we can't do it now. We'd be offside with the notice. So we need a mechanism that gives our staff time to provide the notice. That's what I've been looking for throughout my comments here so far. And I've heard the latest from Ms. Wells. Councillor Stoner?
I'll second Councillor Hamilton's motion to table this to June 4th.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a mover and a seconder. Is there any other comments on this particular piece? I know we all have lots to say, likely. Councillor Pettingill.
yeah, I guess I think we will need clear direction, because it sounds like we will, certain options could get us into trouble given what our bylaws say about public hearings and so on. So we'll need clear direction from staff around what those pitfalls are.
Yep, absolutely. This is about creating the space so that we can do just that. Any other comments on this? Okay. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Greenlaw opposes. Motion carries. Thank you. So, and that'll come back to us in due course. So moving on, we have we don't have any approval of minutes referred from the consent agenda. We don't have any business arising from the minutes. We had no committee minutes and reports. Any notice of motion, Council?
Sorry, Chair.
What's that? Sorry.
I had pulled the
Oh,
staff
sorry.
memo.
Yeah, sorry. No, thank you. Sorry about that. So let's go to, yes, we were dealing with those in the order that they appeared. So yeah, sorry about that. 7C1, the wood fiber natural gas and Fortis BC Eagle Mountain pipeline project update memo. Yeah, sorry about that, Councillor Stoner. Would you like to speak to that? Are you there, Councillor Stoner? Councillor Stoner, we don't seem to have your audio anymore.
Oh,
For the
no,
first
I
time.
can't.
Oh, there
Oh,
you go.
there we go. Am I back?
Okay, you are back. Thank you.
Great.
Take it away.
Yeah, so just wanted to acknowledge these quarterly reports and continue to thank staff for their efforts to try and coordinate the proponents to better understand the ongoing cumulative impacts of these two projects on our community. The new addition, I think, in this one is the section 4, the issues log. As we continue to see these proponents move forward in our community with their projects, we're starting to hear from
Councillor Stoner, we've lost your audio again. I don't know. I can buy you some time because I think there's likely many comments around this, but if you could, I want to make sure that you're still there or here in this meeting. Maybe we'll give Councillor Stoner some space to resolve her technical issues. We'll look to staff. Should we do a quick recess to give her space to? Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone's in the meeting. So why don't we we're right near the end suggestions here. I'm thinking a 5-minute recess. Let's take a 5-minute recess. We'll give Councillor Stoner time to maybe log out and back in, unplug it and plug it back in, whatever the piece is. So we'll recess and let's come back at 8:55 and we'll see what happens there. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Stoner, did you make it back?
I think I'm back.
We can hear you loud and clear, so I will pass back. Feel free to start from the beginning. You were in and out before I called it there. So over to
Great.
you.
Thanks everybody for the short recess to address my technical issues. I wanted to pull this memo from staff in part because I continue to be grateful for the efforts that they put in on a quarterly basis to try and corral all the work that's going on between these two proponents and provide some clarity with our community of what is happening across both of the projects. I also noticed, I think that this is the first time that we are seeing section 4 of the report, which is the issues log, which highlights some of the concerns that we've heard from community, as well as our staff are picking up with some of the ongoing challenges and non-conformancies with the environmental assessment certificate conditions of both projects. And so I wanted to pull this with an action directed, and I'll put a motion on the floor that the mayor write a letter to the EAO highlighting ongoing concerns and noted compliance issues with the WLNG and EGP EA certificate conditions. And if that is seconded, I'll speak to it.
Thank you. Councillor Green, last seconds. Yep, go ahead.
Thanks very much, and thanks to my council colleagues' support as a seconder. I think that this is important because time is of the essence. We know that this project is going ahead, that there's ongoing work in our community, and we are seeing some of the challenges and the cracks of not adhering to their EA certificate conditions. And I think our best approach is to continue to increase our advocacy towards the EAO and relevant ministers to continue to elevate our community's concerns. And so that's why I'm putting this motion forward, so that we can see some action in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Mayor Herver, I'd like to speak to a different aspect of this report, if I may do so at this time, or would you?
Well, we have a
very good
a particular motion here about directing me to write a letter on behalf of council, highlighting the concerns, to paraphrase the motion. So
fair enough. I'll wait then.
Okay, yeah, we'll have other opportunity to. Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I just wonder if we are clear on what all the apparent inconsistencies are. I think there are a number within the district boundaries. We've heard from our business community. We've talked about condition 14. There's been a couple other things, but also things that seem inconsistent. For example, the use of Port Melon and so on, which aren't don't seem consistent with the certificate either. And so I would personally like to have all of those addressed and understand the enforcement and expectations of compliance with all those things within and without our boundaries, just the certificate in general.
Okay. Councillor Stoner, I'll go to you as the mover. Do you have a reply for Councillor Pettingill?
My intention with the motion was to be slightly vague, to provide the mayor and staff some flexibility as to what they might want to put in that letter, and anticipate that that might come back to council for discussion if they see fit. But I think even just the list that is provided in this staff memo is a good basis. And if there's additional components, then we can add to it at a later date.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that as I set out to execute one of these. I appreciate having the room to pull in the things that would be I'd consider relevant to this. So I think part of that is covered in the issues log, but there are other issues as well. So I can work with staff to make sure that we do our best to encompass all of that, which I think is the intent of the speakers I've heard from so far. So I'll go to Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces for me is the cumulative impact assessment for the housing piece. I think that's really important because I think we're already seeing the impacts of it, and it's just critical to be able to quantify these impacts, especially for future communities who are entering into LNG projects. And then the other pieces, we've been getting a lot of emails about how poor the living quality is at the in the Port Mellon facilities, which is also disconcerting. I'm not sure if that should be addressed as well, but it's like causing mental strain and there's no ventilation and things like this. So I don't know, maybe that should be addressed as well. But yeah, the housing piece, the local procurement piece, we've been hearing a lot from our local businesses that they aren't having opportunities for local procurement, and that is supposed to be, you know, a financial benefit to our community. So I think that should be addressed as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll aim to address as many of those things as I can in this piece of correspondence, and if I feel that I'm at a crux point, I'll bring it back to this group, but I'd prefer to get it off as soon as possible. But I know the correspondence precisely that you're referring to, and that is a matter of concern and likely of others around the table, particularly on the current accommodation setup. So are there any other comments on this? I'm happy to take this forward, and thank you to Council for the direction to do so. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay. And sorry, I almost skipped over that one, Councillor Stoner. It's a lot of moving pieces today. So now we have, sorry, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. I appreciate also Councillor Stoner pulling this letter up. I had another comment I wish to make on it, is a comment. And this is an issue arising from the Section A Fortis BC activity updates for February 1st through April 30th. Under the activity item North Crumpet Pipeline Alignment, it states, under completed activities, alignment to follow Fortis BC right-of-way, and under upcoming activities, district to monitor. It's my understanding that Fortis has not confirmed that it will be using its right-of-way, and that's been a matter under discussion between our district engineering staff, Fortis, and the North Crumpet Development Project proponents for some time, and it's still unresolved. It's a matter not only of serious risk or involving serious risk for the North Crumpet property and issues of environmental issues there, and essentially sterilizing development opportunity on that property. It's also a matter of risk for neighboring Squamish Nation lands immediately to the northwest and to the west of the North Crumpet project area. For this reason, I'm passing on the comment that I think it's important that not only the district be monitoring, but that council be apprised of this issue ongoing, considering the stakes involved. We have had significant discussion of this pipeline alignment approximately 2 years ago, and indeed we had a technical presentation from a national association on this matter and the national standards that are involved. So that's just my comment, my recommendation that council be kept apprised of this issue of the pipeline alignment. There are significant other stakeholder risks and involved. Thank you.
So thank you for that. Just sorry, it's been a long day. This report, I wanted to make sure. Sorry, we need to either move receipt, which is where it was originally, or if we need to go into detail to specifically address something, then we need to refer this to a future committee of the whole to grapple with it. I appreciate highlighting, challenging pieces for each of us here, but I want to be sure that we need direction one way. I'll be looking for direction one way or the other with that. So that particular matter seems to be something that's in the district to monitor. So category. So we'll see where that sits. If anyone feels, and this is not just on this topic, but on any of these pieces, that this requires more conversation, and then we'll need to refer to a future, likely a committee of the whole, where we can have the appropriate staff member or staff team assembled so we can actually address concerns there. So I just want to state that. Yeah, before I go around the table. So I'll let everyone ponder that, but I'll go to Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, and I won't get into depth in the pipeline alignment. I've raised concerns about, given the lack of information we've had about safety, the proximity to new zoning, which is in our purview. And so maybe this is where this is coming from. And I'm glad they're thinking about that. But I did have two minor questions I think are easy to answer. Is it okay to ask those, or that those would need to be referred?
You're welcome to pose them, but the answers may be we don't have the right person to address them. So if you want to pose them and try, otherwise we'll need to refer it to a future meeting. So
okay, and I do see Ms. Mulligan is on the line, so hopefully.
Ms. Mulligan is on the line, but our process with these memos is that if council wants Q&A and discussion, it's really best to refer to a committee of the whole. We're sort of, this is the thin edge of the wedge, and Ms. Mulligan isn't prepared this evening to respond to this memo. So I would respectfully ask that council please refer it to a time when Ms. Mulligan can be here in place with the appropriate staff team, and then we can answer your questions for you.
Okay, I think these are very minor, so maybe I'll just try with an email, and I'm not sure it requires a whole committee of the whole, but I'll try with an email then and see where it goes. Thank you.
Okay. No, that's okay. That's what we need to hear. So, so at this point, we have a decision to receive, or if there is interest in moving receipt. Is there a seconder for receipt on this? Councillor Anderson moves or seconds. Thank you. Any comments? Yeah, go ahead.
I sincerely appreciate these update memos from staff and also recognize the challenge in keeping ourselves on task and reading the memo and waiting for more fulsome discussions when they are appropriate. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm supportive of the motion. I think the these are challenging. There's a lot of moving pieces, and particularly when we get into the sort of the outstanding compliance issues and so on, it's really challenging. I appreciate the direction earlier to write a letter, and I think we have enough to do that. But if this trend continues, then these are likely to. Future memo like this is likely to end up at a committee of the whole for more fulsome dig into the various pieces of it. So, but at this point, I think I've got some good direction out of this, and appreciate the conversation so far. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Take a deep breath. Now that we've been through a couple, moving on from that, we have. No correspondence, or sorry, no approval of minutes referred from consent agenda, no business arising, no committee minutes and reports. Any notice of motion? Seeing none. We have no council and staff camera announcements. We've already done the unscheduled public attendance. This is open question period, clarification related to agenda items. Does anyone have a question? Yes, if you could, we'll need that through the podium so that everyone gets it, but go ahead. This is clarification related to agenda items tonight.
Hey folks, Andrew Hughes with the Squamish Chief here. I need some clarification about the reconsideration. The way I'm understanding it is that on June 4th, Council will reconsider the April 30th TUP application as it was on April 30th. Is that worded correctly? I guess is my question.
Maybe I'll defer to our staff on this one.
Sorry, just so I'm clear, can you repeat? Okay.
So on June 4th, Council will reconsider the April 30th TUP application from WLNG as it was on April 30th.
Yes, so the actual motion was that council authorized the temporary use permit for a 1-year period with the conditions noted, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the temporary use permit. So that's tabled for consideration on June 4th. At that meeting, council can choose to either approve that, defeat that, amend that, refer it to staff.
Okay, yep, that's all the clarity that I need. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions of clarity? Okay, moving on, council or staff announcements. Councilor French.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 2 events coming up that I quickly want to highlight. The Hike for Hospice gathering is on Saturday at Junction Park from noon to 2:30. The fundraising event is being done primarily online, and details can be found at sea2skyhospicesociety.ca. The challenge has been issued to local elected officials within the Sea to Sky Hospice Society service area, which reaches from Lions Bay to Mount Currie. And Councillor Kathy Jewett in Whistler is rallying our friends in Whistler and Area D representative with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District, Tony Rainbow. He is working with firefighters in the region to raise funds. And the Hospice Society does great work for those in the final stages of healthcare. They've got a pretty significant fundraising goal that is north of $40,000, I believe, for this event. So I just want to make sure that everybody was well aware of that event. And then the Squamish Off-Road Triathlon is set for Sunday, the following day at Alice Lake. Volunteers are still needed, and you can sign up to volunteer by going to SquamishTriathlon.org. The event started as a memorial to triathlete and Squamish resident Bob McIntosh. Following the swim in Alice Lake, the competitors will ride a mountain bike course and then switch to a trail run circuit in the park area. Great event, and if you're not doing anything on Sunday, the event organizers could certainly use some help with things like body marking and course marshaling and helping out with racer food. Those are just some of the examples of the volunteer opportunities. It's a very rewarding event to participate in. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Anderson next and then Greenlaw.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. I'd like to take the opportunity to draw attention to an article that just appeared in the Squamish Chief newspaper. The title is New Chief Harry Family Scholarship Aims to Boost Indigenous Students Across Canada. We happen to have Chief Dale Harry in the audience with us this evening. I'll quote a couple of lines from the Chief article. The scholarship will support 10 Indigenous students with $50,000 over 5 years. And Harry and his entire family are well known in the Sea to Sky corridor for a number of things, but for the support of education. This has long been well recognized over the decades, people in the community pointing to the contribution of this family for education in the fields of education. Now we have a program, a scholarship program that exists. When I grew up in Squamish, there was no preschool or kindergarten programs, and that might explain why I'm the less balanced person that I might otherwise have been. But they did not exist. And the person who brought into being kindergarten and preschool programs in this valley was Gwen Harry, Cheshire Gwen Harry, Chief Dale Harry's mother. I am aware, because I've done a number of projects with Chief Dale's sister, of the role of their father, the late Ernie Harry, in introducing language instruction at Totem Hall years ago, a pioneering program for the Squamish Nation community. So last summer, Gwen Harry took part in an event at the library in connection with the commemorating the 100-year anniversary of the Squamish Nation amalgamation. And what Gwen Harry wanted to talk about was education and her pride in her accomplishments and contributions in that field, and not least that preschool program, which still runs today. So I just think it's a very special thing that we have this program now, or that a scholarship program exists to commemorate the significant contributions of Gwen Harry and the late Ernie Harry and the whole family in the area of education. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Next, I have Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to share that I am still doing my quote unquote office hours on Thursdays at Sweet Threads between 12 and 2. And if anybody wants to come by and talk about any municipal issues or concerns they have in our community, that's a good place to catch us since we don't have regular office hours anywhere else. Just want to make myself accessible and also point out that if I'm not mistaken, this Saturday is the grand opening of the Oceanfront Park. So festivities will be held there. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Any other updates? Okay, did I, council or staff? Okay, I'll go to, if there's nothing else from council, I will go to Ms. Glende and then I will save the final position for myself. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through the mayor, staff wanted to update council and the community that this year, given the resourcing, staffing constraints we've had in finance to date, and finance has done a fabulous job, as you know, so far with year-end statements and getting prepared for the audit. And now we're fully into financial planning, that we've decided not to provide first quarterly variance report to council and the community. We do find that that one seems to be the least meaty. Sorry, I can't think of a better description, because generally in the first quarter, we've barely started spending money and the invoices haven't caught up. So we're hoping that council is okay with that, and look forward to the Q2 variance report that will be much more fulsome when it arrives.
Okay, thank you for that. And I would agree with your assessment. The Q1 variance, these are variance reports, and as not a lot of businesses has really transpired in that Q1, it's really hard to really glean much from the Q1 in my experience. So I support that. So I'll start with take this opportunity to sort of touch on a few things that have happened since we were last together. Oh, Councillor Stoner.
Oh, thanks. Just a few things that I wanted to highlight, building on Ms. CAO Glende's comments. While we just wrapped up year-end financials, we are now jumping 2 feet firmly into forward-looking for budget, and that will start with some public engagement work over the next few weeks. You'll see staff and council out at places like the farmers market, so the public can help us understand what our community priorities are in advance of our 2025 to 2029 budget priority process. So hopefully we'll see folks at this farmers market this Saturday and other Saturdays through the next month or so. And I also just want to recognize that tomorrow and Thursday are the Squamish-Willamette Regional District board meetings. These board meetings typically happen in Pemberton, but they are happening off-site this month, and they'll be hosted in Furry Creek, so the south end of the Squamish-Willamette Regional District, and we look forward to hosting our northern regional directors down in the southern part of the region, and giving them a bit of a tour of some of the things that are happening down here in the south. We try and do regional tours twice a year, once in the north and once in the south, and we look forward to having our regional directors here in the south end of the Squamish-Willamette Regional District for the next 2 days.
All right, thank you for that. It's going to be exciting. I really enjoy, also sitting on that board, I enjoyed I think it was our December trip to Lillooet, and then points beyond to see the devastation, particularly around Gun Lake, relating to the wildfire. So I'm looking forward to having the board more in our neck of the woods, and continue to work to build the context for the challenges we're facing here. Okay, so on the 8th, since we last met, on the 8th was the mayor's luncheon with the Chamber of Commerce. It was great to get together with the business community, and thank you to my colleagues that were able to make the trip. And it's a great event, and with a beautiful venue up at the Sea to Sky Gondola, and some sort of healthy discussion with the the business community. Some of that we heard about today, as far as the opportunities for procurement opportunities through the WL concerns around receiving opportunities through the WLNG Fortis project, amongst other things were discussed. That particular one received a few questions. And then going forward on the 11th, I sit on a new group called the Equipsum House Sound Biosphere Roundtable, which is part of the governance of the new Equipsum House Sound Biosphere initiative. That group is still forming and developing its own terms of reference and so on. But it was great to spend some time with folks that sit around that table. There were about 20 people. I think the total round table is going to be 30 is the number. And that was held on Gambier Island, which was really great to see, sort of sitting right in the middle of Equipsum Howe Sound. And folks came from the Sunshine Coast, from Bowen Island, and then, of course, up through the Sea to Sky corridor. So I look forward to continuing that work. I believe that group's going to meet quarterly going forward. And that will continue to develop. On the 13th, which is Monday, spoke at the BC Fire Training Officers Association conference, happened in Squamish. And there's a few things. That group, obviously, I think it's evident by who these folks are concerned about community safety first and foremost. Many of them were there communities near them were on fire evacuation. So I think their dedication to training and to keeping their communities safe is truly remarkable. And I hope, as much as I enjoy sunny days, I hope for lots of rainy days for all these folks affected, to make their jobs easier. I also think that it really was great to be with them just briefly for the sort of the opening ceremony, and a few speeches by the leaders of their associations that were participating, and really a highlight on not just community safety, fire preparedness, wildfire training, all this stuff, but really looking after their mental health of their members was really front and center. And for some of the folks that have worked in that industry in those roles for a long time, we're really speaking about how far it's come from the old ways. And I think that's great. We need to both be safe in the individual response, but the safety of the responders in the long term is also our collective safety as a community. So I think it was really exciting to see that. And it also highlighted our need for conference capacity in the community. They did a great job, but we were wedged into a spot that just fit the group at the Executive Suites Hotel. And anytime, I think when firefighters get together and there's lots of, the full dress uniform and bagpipes, it gets really tight in the existing conference facilities in Squamish. So that was also a takeaway from that, as much as I do love the bagpipes. Mayor's drop-in on Monday had on the 13th was fairly well attended, and as always with these, or as often happens, conversation was all over the place, from the major projects to the speed limits on specific streets and traffic calming measures. So this one, unlike others, didn't have a theme to give the opportunity for that wider conversation. And thank you to everyone that came out for that. Where do I want to go from this? Sorry, there's been a few things in case. And then it was Local Government Awareness Week last week, and my favorite day of the year, which is Mayor for a Day. So I got to take 4 young people, spend the morning with 4 young people that won this experience, which included a tour of Muni Hall, including this space, which wasn't the most popular part of the trip, but but then we moved on to but then we moved on to the police department and then the fire hall, and those were far more exciting places. But it was great to spend some time and to watch that sort of sense of wonder as like the actual mechanics of these things get discussed, and then the Mayor's for Day get delivered back to the school in a fire truck to a pizza party. So local government is yeah, I think we created a couple rock stars for at least a short period of time there, but it was really really great. And their submissions, the two winning submissions, one jumped out at me, what sort of put it over the edge for me, from the younger group, which I think was 6 years old, was talking about one of the recommendations in it was a poster, was about books at the library coming in more languages, so more people would have access to the knowledge, which I thought was really great to see that sort of outside of themselves. And then the other piece was actually a video submission for the older group, and in which these young folks knocked on people's doors asking if they thought the municipality was doing a good job, what they would change, and like that public engagement was remarkable, versus many submissions that were a little more focused on a particular issue. So I really appreciate both of those things, and those were sort of what got those ones over the line. That got us to the weekend. So just a few things that have happened. And I will say that this weekend on the Saturday, the opening of the Oceanfront Park, I think I'm just over the moon that this is where we are, and what a great kickoff to summer. And to foreshadow some of my remarks there, like Squamish has been an oceanfront community standing here with our back to the ocean without proper access for the community, and that's all about to change on Saturday. So I'm really, really looking forward to that piece, and I hope the community comes out and celebrates. And for those that like to experience it in a quieter time, anytime after Saturday, Oceanfront Park, go check it out and enjoy your new community space. That is my update. Just a couple things, and we've already done. We don't have a motion to close, so we're looking for a motion to terminate. Goes to Councillor Stoner. Thank you for your quick response. Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much.